The sea at night is a black sheet, pulled tight over a sleeping giant. On the rig, the world shrinks to steel, light, and the habit of staying alive. I came off a 14-hour shift with drill mud drying to a brittle crust on my fingers. My knuckles scuffed where a stubborn wrench had tried to educate me. The gangway hummed underfoot. Above, floodlights cast floating rectangles on midnight water. Below, generators breathed in a low, even animal purr. In the bunk room, 4 bunks stacked like promise and exhaustion, I sat on the lower rack and woke my phone. I expected a compressor reminder from Houston or a note from Jackson about the Erusa in toolbox talk. What I got was a sentence that detonated the shape of my life. I'm leaving you and moving to Palm Springs with my 25-year-old babe. I'm taking all our money with me. See. The message perched on the screen as if a bird had flown in and mistaken my chest for a branch. A second bubble slid up, a screenshot of our joint account, a red banner across the top where a 6-figure balance used to be, and, like perfume in a hospital room, a kiss emoji. There is a version of a man who throws the phone, punches the locker, howls. I am not that version. Offshore teaches you that flailing kills, stillness thinks. I read the text twice, each time feeling something deeper become oddly steady, like the way you find your feet on a deck that won't stop moving. I typed what my hands knew to type. Sure, good luck. 2 sentences that weren't bravery or surrender. They were a clean cut where the rope had already frayed through. The shower hissed, rust stain on the tile, steam curling in a room too small for despair. I scrubbed until my palms tingled. When I wiped the mirror, a stranger stared back. Sun-toughened skin, salt-carved lines gathered around eyes that looked like they had forgotten how to blink. He did not look broken. He looked busy, inventory busy, like he was counting cogs he could still trust. Lungs, back, know-how, pride, work ethic, a spine that kept saying, stand up. I lay down and didn't sleep. Offshore, sleep is a negotiation, never a contract, so I gave it a few minutes and then terminated talks. At 05:30, I was on the catwalk drinking coffee that could take paint off a hull. Sea wind wore the night thin. Out at the horizon, a thread of iron dawn stitched the black sky to a very dark blue. At 06 Aruwanki, 16 men circled for safety muster, hard hats like a dozen planets under fluorescent suns. Jackson, my second, inhaled to ask a question and thought better of it. He knows the gospel out here. If the boss looks steady, gravity applies. If he doesn't, gravity negotiates. Same drill, I said. Hands on tools, eyes on each other. We're going to pretend nature is patient and physics is polite, like we do every day. Jackson smirked. Copy. I did not say. My wife of 18 years emptied our account while I was freezing a drill string 10,000 feet below water. I didn't say. I tasted the metal of a life I thought was mine. We had more immediate threats, pressure spikes, careless feet, a snapped sling. Personal storms can rattle the hatches after hours. During hours, steel and procedure have the floor. We ran checks like a ritual, torque values, mud weight, a whispering valve that wanted attention. Around 10 more, Jackson sidled up with a rag, and that sideways look men use for tenderness when tenderness isn't allowed. You good, Atio? He asked. I'm vertical, I said. Vertical is victory. He nodded like I'd confirmed a rumor. Then we went back to pretending the ocean was not older than our ambitions. Lunch was chicken that had lost its argument with heat lamp physics. I ate because a man who quits food quits thinking. In the break room, the television showed a soap opera where people fought about nothing with the furor of saints. I opened my email and met Law's version of a soap, a filed petition for divorce, abandonment, financial control, emotional cruelty, words that don't bruise skin but do cut bone. I closed it, counted to 60 like a bomb tech with a pocket watch. Then I went back to deck, because even when a life is ending, a rig is alive, and alive things need a shepherd to keep them from killing themselves and you. That night, the sat phone rang. The sound of it is unmistakable, the auditory equivalent of a flashlight in a cave. You sitting? My cousin Brendan asked. Standing is cheaper, I said. She's been siphoning for 14 months. 2 here, 3 there. Kept it small till the last 90 days. Total 214 across accounts. Not the 142 you saw. She also changed the life insurance beneficiary 6 months ago. Home equity line of 40 with your signature forged. Who's the boy? I asked. My voice sounded like a hallway. Name's Devin Forrester, 25, former trainer mostly. Employment gap years like missing teeth. He dates older women with stable finances. 3 prior exits. The women kept the bills. And now? And now texts, cloud backup. She set up her new phone with your Apple ID last year, never changed the password. I'm looking at exchanges about a house in Palm Springs, a bank freeze, and something called Plan B. There's a line, insurance exists for a reason. Accidents happen. Something inside me found a colder setting and clicked. It wasn't hatred. Hatred is loud and burns oxygen. This was denser than air and very, very quiet. Okay, I said, we do it by the book. You build the binder, I'll land, we'll serve papers, freeze what's left, and let truth testify. I hung up and stared at my locker. The metal didn't blink. The rig breathed. The sea pretended to sleep. I lay back and finally closed my eyes. Not sleep, just a rehearsal for calm. People ask what kind of man chooses steel and sea over a soft couch and nightly dinner. They never ask what kind of marriage chooses the same. The answer is, one that believes distance is a problem solved by money and a schedule. I met Krista at a fishing supply store in Odessa 19 years ago. The place smelled like cedar shavings and old waiters. She wore a red apron with a name tag that said, Chris in black Sharpie. You look like a man who pretends to know the difference between 5 weight and 6, she said before I'd spoken. I know the difference, I said. One's for trout who think they own the stream, one's for trout who actually do. She laughed. Her laugh had edges in all the right places. We grabbed coffee that tasted like a dare, and a month later we watched a mediocre band in a bar with a good jukebox and decided we were something. 11 months later, married. I was 33. She was 31. I already owned a house, clear thanks to a small producer buyout that made early stockholders look smarter than they were. Offshore paid more than was decent. Onshore paid in uprooted plans. Rotation is math. 2 months on, 1 off, or some variation that makes birthdays a coin flip and anniversaries a negotiation. In the early years, absence tasted like adventure. Return tasted like reward. We'd spend a month compressing a season into errands and dinners and the kind of lazy Saturdays that feel stolen even when they're yours. The money made us brave with choices. Better truck for me, better kitchen for her, better mortgage for the bank's ledger. If marriages fail by explosion, you can collect shrapnel. If they fail by evaporation, you don't notice the water's gone until your tongue cracks. The first hairline cracks were charming. You missed dinner with the Millers, she'd say, and I'd make a joke about the Millers needing fewer opinions. Do you really have to take Saudi? She'd ask, and I'd say, we can cash 6 months of town salary in 9 weeks. She'd roll her eyes and call me a ledger with boots. I'd kiss her and call her a calendar with hair. We turned loneliness into stand-up. It worked until it didn't. Year 12, something changed timbre. She redecorated while I was offshore. Walls that had been the color of unbuttered toast became magazine white. The couch became a statement about low backs and high style. My grandfather's brick-heavy recliner moved to the garage. Needed a change, she said. She didn't mean paint. Or she did, but the paint had company. 2 months before the text, I saw transfers we hadn't discussed. Foundation repairs, she wrote. I walked the slab. It held like truth. Outside sat a black Audi I'd never seen. New car smell is specific, but this did not smell like a car. It smelled like a decision. Calls grew short the way shadows grow long when something blocks light. She said busy in 3 different registers, and none of them were the one that used to be for me. Our neighbor Harold, retired petroleum engineer, precise like a blueprint, texted me a photo 4 days before the bomb. A moving truck at my curb. He wrote, thought you should know. No punctuation. Harold respects punctuation, which is how I knew this was not gossip. This was a fact offered like a handrail. I did not fly home. Men mistake action for solution. Sometimes the next right thing is to wait for enough rope to show you where the knot is. So when the text arrived, I already lived in a house with doors quietly closing. Here is the part people disagree with. Years before, after watching a colleague lose everything in a divorce that began with a fight about curtains, I had built a seawall. Brendan and I formed Winter Holdings, A clean, tax-declared entity that would hold a portion of my earnings designed to outlast luck. 70% of income rode into that shelter like a barge into dry dock. Household bills, joint savings, vacations, and Krista's projects rode in the joint accounts. If love stayed simple, winter would be a footnote. If it didn't, I would at least have a map when the lights went out. I didn't hide winter. I just didn't sing about it. You don't give speeches about seatbelts, you click them, you drive. When Brendan said activate protocol winter, I wasn't a man scrambling. I was a man turning a key we'd cut years ago. Landing after rotation feels like walking off the world onto a smaller, noisier one. The airport lit me in fluorescence that made everyone look like witnesses. Houston air had just rained. It smelled like victory over heat and loss to humidity. Brendan's Suburban had a cracked dash and an engine that hummed like it had opinions. He handed me a burner phone and a black folder, the thickness of a stillborn novel. The bank froze the inbound account for unusual activity. They'll want you in person. We let them want, he said. Also, she thinks you're still offshore. We preserve that fiction. Thomas's office had glass walls and a conference table that looked like it had eaten smaller tables for breakfast. Thomas wore a suit cut to look unremarkable, the camouflage of competence. He note-stacked 3 documents in front of me, counters to the divorce petition, an emergency motion to freeze assets and unwind transfers, and a criminal complaint for forgery on the HELOC, and the listing agreement for my house. Complication, he said. She filed a domestic violence claim yesterday. The violence is my absence, I said. It's been ongoing for 7 weeks. He already had a binder tabbed like liturgy, rig badge logs for every shift I'd clocked, manifest entries for the crew chopper in and out, passport stamps, even the satellite pin pings when we'd filed drilling progress by email. We moved to dismiss this morning, he said. Judge Winters has very little patience for tactical restraining orders that smell like leverage. She's listing the house? I asked. Thomas slid over a glossy PDF. There it was, my home offered at 30% under market, the real estate copy chirping about a seller motivated by a career transition. My signature curled at the bottom, a forgery so confident it almost pulled you in. We'll nullify the listing on service, Thomas said. Sheriff at 09 Brewers, you want to be present? I want them to see my face when the wind changes, I said. He studied me for a breath. Some lawyers get spooked when clients ask to stand within spitting distance of the storm. Thomas only nodded. We do it by the book. Harold's front room smelled like gun oil and magnolia. He didn't shake my hand so much as calibrate it. You want coffee, neighbor? He asked. Harold uses neighbor like a knighthood. He bestows it when you've proven you won't waste the title. We stood at his bay window like old men at parades, except the parade was my house being unmade. The black Audi sat at a diagonal like it wanted to look taller. The pool glittered in salt. A young man I'd never met strolled by the water, checking his reflection in his phone as if it owed him money. Fella drinks midday, Harold observed, sipping his black coffee. Beer for breakfast is not a felony, but it is a resume. Around midnight, sleep put on brass knuckles and beat me up. I got back at it by spreading the folders on Harold's kitchen table and building order. I stacked the bank records so you could see the slope. Small draft, a steeper line, then a cliff in the last 90 days. I laid the HELOC documents beside a known specimen of my signature and let the difference glare. I printed the text threads where Plan B twitched like a rattlesnake under a couch. In the middle, I placed a photo of my grandfather's oak desk because some things do not live on paper. They live in objects that taught you what weight is. At 8:30, Krista appeared at my front door with a banker's box. She wore running tights and a university sweatshirt that wasn't the one I earned. Her face carried a posture I knew, efficient, slightly annoyed, performatively busy. Devon came out behind her, chin up like a man who expects the hallway to apologize for being narrow. At 8:45, a truck with the name of a moving company I didn't recognize shouldered the curb. 3 men hopped out with the friendly speed of people who do this every day and have learned that lives are cargo if you lift them right. At 8:55, an unmarked sedan tucked in behind the truck. 2 deputies stepped out, one with a clipboard, one with a face like we've seen worse. A woman in a navy blazer rounded the hood with a flat stack of documents that looked heavier than paper. Court carries gravity the way storm clouds carry rain. Showtime, I told Harold. He rested his hand on my shoulder for exactly 1 second, like grounding a wire. We crossed the street. Krista opened the door with her voice already engaged. Hi, could you? Then she saw uniforms. Then she saw me. Shock is a physical thing. It starts in the knees, hits the jaw, then settles where the breath hides. On her, it did a quick lap and returned to the eyes, where it turned to calculations so fast it was almost applause for the performance. Mrs. Harrington? The deputy asked. We're serving orders issued this morning. He handed over the stack like an altar boy presenting a missile. The court officer spoke in professional commas. Emergency freeze of accounts and assets. Temporary restraining order on disposition of property. Nullification of listing pending verification of alleged forgery. Notice of hearing. This is for Mr. Forrester as well. She turned to Devon, who squared his shoulders as if facts could be bluffed. You can't just, he began. You can retrieve clothing and toiletries for 30 minutes, the deputy said. Nothing else leaves. Moving truck stays put. Driver, you're parked legally. Don't move the vehicle. Miles, Krista said, and my name in her mouth sounded like a nickname from school that no longer fits. This is a misunderstanding. If we could just talk. Today is for paper, I said. Talk has been very expensive. Her tears arrived on cue. I recognized the choreography and hated that I recognized the choreography. Devon touched her elbow in a way that wanted to look like support and looked like ownership. That told me more than the texts did. They went inside under escort. From the doorway, I glimpsed my grandfather's desk half wrapped in a moving blanket, an indignity that made my molars meet. 30 minutes later, they emerged with duffels that slumped like tired dogs. The court officer, practiced kind, repeated instructions. Personal items only, the rest under court control, pending inventory. Krista's eyes found mine, and for a second, history tried to audition for a role in this present. 19 years is not a number, it is a landscape. But landscapes erode if you move rivers. I walked back across the street to Harold's. He poured coffee that had waited under a towel like a secret. We stood by the window, two men who had wrestled industry and married weather. You did not look at the mess, Harold said, which is his way of saying well done. You looked at the horizon. Courtrooms are rooms that teach posture. Judge Winters kept campaign posters firmly in the past and ran her bench like a good foreman. No shortcuts, no shouting, no pretending. Thomas opened with the badge logs, passport stamps, and sat phone billing that proved my physical absence during the dates the petition claimed I had been an emotional assassin. He did not gloat. He just let time testify. Bradley, Krista's lawyer, spoke with theatrical sorrow about the indignities of distance. He tried to dress abandonment in a tuxedo and call it neglect. Judge Winters listened the way welders watch puddles. For the moment, the metal lies. When Thomas presented the text that contained Plan B, you could feel the room recalibrate. Insurance isn't a metaphor in a judge's world. It is a ledger entry with a corpse occasionally attached. Mrs. Harrington, the judge said, without looking over her glasses because she did not need the prop, are you aware of the penalties for conspiracy to commit fraud, or for participating in plans that could be worse than fraud? Your Honor, these are out of context, Bradley stated. They are in context to this court, Judge Winters said. Emergency protective order against Mr. Harrington is dismissed for lack of merit and presence. Asset freeze remains. Listing nullified pending handwriting analysis. The forgery complaint is referred to the district attorney. She closed one folder and tapped another. As to the holding company, Mr. Harrington maintains the disclosures to the IRS are complete and ongoing, household expenses were met from joint accounts, and no evidence suggests concealment from this court. We will proceed to dissolution with eyes open. Gavels don't slam in real life. They retire a point with the tone of a sentence. Court recessed. In the hallway, Krista drifted toward me like a ship whose captain forgot the wind. I never, she began. You did, I said, not cruelly, just not alone. She blinked, and in that blink, I watched memory peel off its own wall and flutter into a trash can. The boy was not behind her. The boy had learned something about silence. Outside, the air was the kind that tries to lift hats. Thomas clapped my shoulder the way a coach touches a player who executed the play exactly as drawn. We're not done, he said, but the ocean turned. We stood on the courthouse steps, three men not celebrating so much as acknowledging a change in pressure. Relief feels like oxygen you didn't know you were rationing. Next, I asked, inventory unwind transfers make the bank do their job. Then you choose, keep the house or divorce the address, Thomas said. I looked at the building I used to call home in my head and realized the house had already filed for divorce from me when it held other people's shadows against its walls. Addresses are opinionated. Sell, I said. We'll send the heirlooms north. Places shouldn't have to forgive us. He nodded once, a man checking a box on a clipboard labeled, Client Chooses Future. The morning after the hearing felt like someone had turned the noise of life down to half volume. No generator hum, no sea hiss, no command channel in my ear, just Texas air and the faint rattle of a coffee mug against my teeth. Freedom is quiet. So is shock. Harold met me at the house, now under court inventory. The deputies had come and gone, tagging furniture with bright orange stickers that made the living room look like a crime scene art exhibit. The pool was still, the water thick with reflected clouds. Krista and Devon's presence had already begun to evaporate, leaving behind the faint smell of someone else's perfume and the echo of laughter that didn't belong here. I walked room by room, clipboard in hand, pretending it was an inspection rather than a post-mortem. Bookshelves gutted of titles she liked but left the ones she pretended to. My technical manuals, a half-read biography of Shackleton. Kitchen drawers rearranged in logic only she understood. On the bedroom dresser, one of her earrings glinted, a single comma in a sentence that would never finish. Brendan arrived at noon with updates. The bank's legal team confirmed the freezes. Transfers over 50 grand reversed within 48 hours. The rest will need affidavits and patience. Patience I had. 18 years of marriage trains you to wait for things that might never return. Thomas called an hour later. The home equity line flagged as criminal investigation. The notary had already folded under questioning. I felt a grim mercy toward that notary, caught between signatures and stories. Late afternoon, I found the object that reconnected me to everything solid. My grandfather's oak desk, half swaddled in a mover's blanket. One of its brass handles hung loose like a tooth in milk. I ran a thumb across the worn surface. The grain rose like a map of patience. Harold helped me carry it across the street to his garage until paperwork allowed me to move it north. 2 men, 70 years of oil field between us, hauling memory in silence. When we set it down, Harold said, "That desk has outlived 3 owners and 2 recessions. Odds are it'll outlive this mess." I nodded. "Then it can babysit me a little longer." That night I slept on Harold's couch. Dreamless sleep, but not empty, more like a clean reboot after a system crash. Rebuilding a financial life after betrayal is like repairing a pipeline while it still carries pressure. You move slowly, bleed off stress, document everything. Brendan and I spent days in Houston offices lined with frosted glass and burnt coffee optimism. Bank managers apologized with corporate sincerity. Auditors typed like court stenographers at a family funeral. "Every dollar leaves footprints," Brendan said, his accountant's voice soothing as antiseptic. "We just follow them backward." We traced transfers through a maze of sub-accounts, shell LLCs, and the digital crumbs of desperation. Her pattern was textbook, small withdrawals to test limits, then rapid escalation once she confirmed I wasn't watching. The last 90 days were a sprint. People in the act of leaving often confuse speed with success. Meanwhile, Thomas filed the restitution schedule and pushed the district attorney for charges. He wanted leverage. I wanted precedent. Fraud leaves evidence, but justice leaves paperwork thicker than steel. At night in my hotel, I read emails I'd ignored for years. Promotions from suppliers, updates from rig buddies scattered across oceans. One from Jackson asking, "You good, boss?" I wrote back, "Good enough to know when to quit." He replied with a single word, "Respect." By Friday, the accounts were stabilized. The joint savings sat under court custody, the HELOC frozen, the house unsellable without my hand. The fortress of Winter Holdings had held exactly as designed. I realized the strange comfort of foresight. It doesn't make you psychic, just prepared for pain. When Thomas called to confirm the next hearing, I told him I'd attend, but after that I wanted out. Out of Texas, out of echoes, out of rooms that smelled like betrayal reheated. He understood. Lawyers see people before and after explosions, rarely during. 3 weeks later, we faced the bench again. Krista looked smaller than memory, her confidence worn to a shine. Devon was conspicuously absent, moved on to new prey, according to a private investigator who tracked him as far as Phoenix before the trail went soft. Patterns don't die, they relocate. Judge Winters conducted proceedings with the weary efficiency of someone who's seen every permutation of greed. She reviewed bank logs, signatures, timestamps, messages. Each document was a nail in a coffin built by its occupant. "Mrs. Harrington," she said, adjusting her glasses, "in 3 decades I've seen many forms of marital breakdown, few so thoroughly planned." Krista whispered something to her attorney. He shook his head gently, the international signal for "stop making it worse." The judge turned to me. "Mr. Harrington, your separation of income through Winter Holdings may look strategic, but it was transparent to taxation and consistent with precedent. This court finds it lawful and prudent." Then back to Krista. "All misappropriated funds are to be returned. Property remains with Mr. Harrington. Spousal support denied. Forgery and conspiracy matters are referred to the district attorney." The gavel fell like punctuation at the end of a long, badly written book. As we exited, Krista approached, tears slick but eyes scanning for purchase. "Miles, please." "I wish you luck," I said. It wasn't sarcasm, it was a benediction from one survivor to another. Then I left her with the marble columns and her echo. Outside, Houston's heat pressed like an unwelcome hand. Brendan exhaled. Thomas folded the final decree into his briefcase as if closing a file on a ghost. In the weeks that followed, I dismantled the remains of our shared life. The Odessa house, once my fortress, now felt like a museum curated by a stranger. Boxes labeled Christmas or Taxes 2012 sat where laughter used to live. Harold helped me catalog heirlooms, the grandfather clock that still kept time 2 minutes slow, the framed photograph of my parents' wedding, the cast iron skillet seasoned by generations. We shipped these north to storage in Missoula. Everything else went to auction or donation. Some losses you measure in dollars, others you measure in the silence left behind. During one last walkthrough, I found a single sticky note on the refrigerator. "I did love you once." No signature, just the handwriting I used to recognize by heart. I folded it and slid it between pages of an old field manual, not as keepsake but as a reminder. Even love leaves paperwork. When the sale closed, I signed with a pen that felt heavier than its weight. Proceeds went directly into the corporate account that had saved me. Thomas emailed, "You are officially a free man, both legally and financially." Freedom, I learned, has no music. It's the sound of your own breathing coming back on time. Montana greeted me with silence you could lean against. Pine sap, cold water, and air that tastes like altitude. 5 years earlier, I'd bought 40 acres outside Missoula, a cabin and a stretch of creek that sang even when frozen. I called the place Winterlight, half joke, half prophecy. Krista never knew it existed. Some sanctuaries should be ungoogleable. The first week I worked like penance, repaired the porch swing with salvaged chain, restained the deck until it reflected sunrise, cleared brush from the trail that wound down to the creek. Muscle memory from rig life made the motions precise. Measure twice, tighten once, curse softly when the wrench slips. There is a therapy in labor that no counselor can invoice. At dusk, I'd sit on the swing with bourbon and watch deer navigate the meadow like decisions you haven't made yet. The mountains swallowed the sun without ceremony. Peace doesn't arrive with trumpets. It seeps through floorboards and waits to see if you'll notice. Brendan called occasionally, mostly to report paperwork milestones. Krista's plea deal, 5 years probation, restitution schedule, unrealistic as hope. Devon reappeared in Arizona dating a recently divorced doctor. Old script, new cast. Thomas retired, sent me a Christmas card that read simply, "Some storms are worth steering through." I pinned it above the desk. Winterlight taught me how to measure time again, not in rotations or pay cycles, but in chores completed before snow. Cut wood, patch roof, check generator, survive. Spring came slow, snow melted like memory, reluctant but inevitable. One afternoon the phone rang, the old burner I kept out of habit. A voice crisp with corporate politeness said, "Mr. Harrington, I'm calling from North Shore Petro Consulting. We have a field project in Saskatchewan, 3-month consultancy. Good rate, minimal travel. Would you consider..." I looked out at the creek swollen with meltwater. at the tools lined up like quiet soldiers on my bench. For 27 years, I had chased paychecks across oceans. Now the world wanted me back on its payroll. "I'll think about it," I said, and I meant it, because thinking, not rushing, is how you know you're healed. After the call, I walked down to the creek. The current carried pieces of ice like slow-moving glass. I tossed in a pebble. It disappeared with a plunk, too small for symbolism. Still, I watched the ripples fade and realized they were circular, not linear, returning, not ending. Evening settles soft in the mountains. When the wind threads through pine needles, it sounds like whispering you can almost translate. I built a new shelf today, sanded it smooth, filled it with books that smell like paper and forgiveness. The oak desk sits by the window, its surface bearing scars of use, not violence. Sometimes, out of old reflex, I check my phone at 03:01. Nothing but darkness and the low hum of the fridge. No messages announcing new disasters, no betrayals wearing emojis. I think about the text that started it all. The irony is that it freed me faster than any apology ever could. She thought she'd taken everything. What she really did was remove everything that wasn't mine anymore. I pour bourbon, step onto the porch. The creek mumbles to itself, content with repetition. Somewhere far off, a coyote files his report to the night. I breathe, slow and even. If you're watching this or reading it or living some version of it, here's what I learned after 6,500 words of mistakes. When the text comes, it's not the end of your story. It's the start of authorship. You get to write the next chapter. Do it with evidence, not anger. Do it with patience, not panic. And when peace finally arrives, don't mistake its quiet for emptiness. It's just your own life waiting for you to listen. I finish the bourbon, set the glass on the porch rail. The sky tilts toward dawn, and for the first time in years, I don't have anywhere I need to be.